Good evening, everyone. Sorry we're late. The Select Board's been in executive session since 4:30. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In our first order of business, we will start out with public comment, but just to give fair warning, I will be rearranging the agenda this evening. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Oh, go ahead. Up to the podium.
Make sure the green light's on.
Green light is on. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm actually, the biggest reason why I'm here is so I could wear my dress one more time.
Okay, they can't hear you.
The main reason I'm here is to wear my dress one more time before the herring migration is done. If you don't know about the herring migration, right now, 2 blocks away, there are thousands of fish this big that have come from Nova Scotia, about from that far away, 1,200 miles. And they're out here because they're coming back to where they were born, actually. And it's an extremely exciting and amazing happening that is only right here. There are other migration places around, but we have our own right here. This Saturday, Maddie and a lot of, Maddie from Manomet, right, who's new to the group this year, are putting on a festival from 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. We've done several of them so far, maybe 5 or 6. But if you got grandkids, bring them over. We have all kinds of things to learn and play with. And I wonder if anybody in this room, let me tell you about the trip in a quick run by. So Ralph and Helen talk to each other in the morning and they say, "Come on, Ralph, come on, Helen, we're going south." And they start to swim, you know, kind of like that. They don't have a boat, they don't have a bicycle, they don't have a motorcycle, and they get to Plymouth. This is the amazing thing. This is so amazing. They have to find, in order to come into where they go, where they need to go, and I'll tell you in a minute because some of you look like you don't know yet. They swim down the coast and they have to find how to get into Plymouth Bay. They have to turn right. What did I say their names were? Ralph and Rosie. Ralph, turn right. Turn left. And there are lots of fish with them, thousands more of them. And how do they know where they're going? How do they know? They're trying to get to Billington Sea, which is where they were born. So they have to go around the jetty, go past the Mayflower. They had little directions on tiny pieces of paper so that they could figure out where they were going. And then, after they got past the Mayflower, they had to go under a little bridge. How big is that bridge? You know, over there where the boats are all up on the things. That they had to find that, these thousands of herring. It's just amazing. And so right there where the ocean water meets the fresh water of Town Brook is just a phenomenally amazing spot on the planet that exists, and it's down the street. The herring start coming around the beginning of April, and they go till the end of May. And if you haven't seen them, please go look, and please bring your grandkids. And even if the festival is over, you can go other days, because they're still there, and they're swimming and swimming and swimming and swimming. So, there. I'm going to ask you if you know a vocabulary word, and it'll remind, we have a fish cam. You can look at it anytime you want. Look it up on this town's website, fish cam, and the fish are swimming. They're swimming all day and all night, and it's the coolest thing to be able to see. Oh, you've been so good to listen. Do you have something that you would like to add?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
There you go.
Oh,
Sorry, just one quick thing. Well, thank you to Herring Lady. She's very famous, everyone, in Plymouth. And, well, definitely further than Plymouth. But I'm Maddie from Manamet, and we just wanted to invite you to the annual Plymouth Herring Run Festival on Saturday from 10 to 3 at the Plymouth Gristmill and Townbrook Park. And for the first year, we're having a happy hour with Happy Fish at the Plymouth Center for the Arts on Friday from 5 to 8. So thank you so much.
thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Please come. Please come.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. So the first order of business, as we continue on, I'm going to be...
My apologies, Madam Chair.
Oh,
Ginny Davis
I'm
has,
sorry. I'm sorry, Ginny.
That's okay. No problem. I was just curious who this lady is in her costume. I don't think she said her name. I'm very curious. I will be involved with this herring run too, through the League of Women Voters. They're going to have a table there. But also, I just want to share some memories. Maggie Mills, who used to write a little column for the O'Colony, wrote an article on my dad in the 1980s, because I remember as a child, and as recently as the 1980s, when the herring came in to Townbrook, there were thousands of seagulls, thousands. I don't know where all the seagulls have gone, but you didn't need anyone to tell you that the heron had arrived in Plymouth. They were just, I mean, if you went down to, you got pooped on, but it was so exciting. There were so many seagulls. So I thank all these people who have brought back attention to how important the heron are to our history and to Plymouth. And thank this lady in her fantastic costume, but I don't know who she is. I just found that kind of curious.
Nancy
So
Carroll is her
thanks for
name.
letting me talk, and I hope everyone will come and enjoy. And also, as far as the Friday night at the Center for the Arts, you actually have to go online and register for that, or they request people to. So maybe the person that spoke about the Friday night could just share what people have to do if they want to go to that. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ginny. Her name is Nancy Carroll, just so you know, AKA Fish Lady. Herring Lady. Yep, you're very welcome. Anybody else for public comment? All right, so we're going to have the Education Foundation, and then the proposed amendments of the shellfish regulations, and then the fire department. Like I said, we're kind of rearranging. There's a lot of staff here, so.
Good evening, thank you.
You're
Appreciate that. Chairman, members of the board, staff, the audience, my name is Dan Gorsica. I'm Vice President of the Plymouth Education Foundation, and I'm here this evening to proudly invite all attending and all watching on TV to our 12th annual gala for the Plymouth Education Foundation, held on Saturday, April 26th at 6 p.m. at the Waverly Oaks Golf Course. The Plymouth Ed Foundation is a nonprofit organization who provides resources for the Plymouth Public Schools and local partners and organizations, advancing education and supporting lifelong learning for all Plymouth residents. The foundation has a 100% volunteer board of directors, and the board shares that exact vision. The foundation solicits, manages, and distributes funds for educational purposes and activities that the Plymouth Public Schools do not otherwise offer, and to other local partners and organizations if it's educational based. In addition, the foundation provides 4 $3,500 scholarships a year to graduating seniors to help advance their education. Donations are gratefully received from individuals, corporations, grants, estates, memorials, and other foundations. The endowment fund allows the foundations to serve this community for years to come. To date, the foundation has awarded over $200,000 in scholarships and educational programs. The foundation was founded in 2008 by a group of dedicated community volunteers created to support and enhance the education of all students in the town of Plymouth. One of the original founders was Adele Manfredi. Adele believed in academic excellence and involvement in the community. As one of the founding members of the Plymouth Education Foundation, she endeavored to support lifelong learning through the creation of an endowment fund that would enhance and augment educational opportunities. For those reasons, the Adele Manfredi Excellence in Education Award was created in her memory to honor those in Plymouth who exemplify extraordinary commitment to education. Every year during the gala, the foundation honors one individual with the Adele Manfredi Award. This year's award recipient is Bob Betters. A lot of you know Bob Betters as a longtime local real estate attorney, but I know Bob as a founder of the Plymouth Education Foundation, and for his kindness and dedication to helping people. We all are very excited to share this award with Bob. It is well deserved. Again, the gala is the foundation's primary fundraiser, and I'm here this evening to invite all members of the board, staff, and those who are in attendance this evening to join us again Saturday, April 26th at 6 o'clock at Waverly Oaks Golf Course. The gala has music, dancing, dinner, drinks, and a silent auction. There's auction items for everyone, including a Bearcat ride from the Plymouth Police Department, sporting event tickets, and packages of local restaurant gift cards. Again, I appreciate you allowing me a few minutes to speak. I hope to see everyone there. If you're interested, for those that are listening, tickets can be purchased on our website at plymoutheducationfoundation.org. And if you don't mind, I have invitations to hand to the board and to staff.
Thank you.
Hey, Dan, what's the date again? You said the 26th, but I think it's the 29th, right?
Thank you.
Okay,
You are
yeah.
correct. It is Saturday, April 29th.
It's a great
Now that I've
event.
said the 26th
No.
12 times, but yes, it's Saturday, the 29th.
I've been there at that event. It's a great event, so good
Thank you,
luck.
John.
Thanks.
All right. Next order of business, it's the proposed amendments of shellfish regulations. And I know our harbor master is here and also the chair of our harbor committee.
Good evening, and I'm just waiting for a presentation to come up. But just as a little backstory, the revised shellfish regulations, this is sort of a housekeeping in nature in the fact that in January 22, oh, thank you. In January 22, the board had a discussion about commercial mussel licenses. And there was some approvals that went forward regarding commercial mussels. And at the end of that presentation, we knew that we would have to go back and look at our shellfish regulations and amend those. So the majority of the changes that you have, there's a red line version that you got in your packets, and I'm just going to cover some of the big pieces here. So as mentioned, January 2022, the Select Board had approved the commercial mussel rules, let's call them, and they were adopted as part of the commercial mussel license conditions. And at the end of that presentation, we did mention we'd go back to the shellfish regulations and include commercial shellfish. So the first major change in Section 3 permits, little e, it used to read in the black that commercial shellfishing and seaworm harvest are prohibited in Plymouth. So we obviously had to change that section to include commercial shellfish. So we replaced it with the red type, including commercial shellfish licenses may be issued by the Select Board based on sustainable commercial amounts of specific shellfish species as reported by the Shellfish Constable. Shellfish harvested with a commercial license may be sold. We did kind of keep this open in case there's other species that come along that we want to allow for commercial shellfishing, so including mussels, and there's one other piece coming up here with razor clams that we'll talk about quickly. So this whole section, Section 7, commercial harvest, is new. And this didn't exist before, and really all of the pieces that we discussed about commercial mussels back in January of 2022, we have included in this section. So it still gives the Select Board the authority to issue commercial licenses, and we put for endorsed species to obviously keep it open. And then we had some minimum size and daily limit, which again was approved back in January. Blue mussels 2 inches in length, 300 bushels per day by drag in shellfish classification areas MB1, CCB 41.2, CCB 41, CCB 39, in water greater than 20 feet at mean low water. What's new here and didn't exist were razor clams. We've had a number of people reach out over the last couple of years and inquire about razor clams. Razor clams are not specifically targeted by recreational diggers. They're more looking for quahogs or soft shell clams, surf clams. So I think we would like to try this in the future here as sort of a trial program, very similar to the mussels, and see if this is another commercial opportunity for us. Monthly commercial landing reports shall be submitted to the Shellfish Constable. Again, that was approved back in January 22. And we did put the option that, you know, if the Shellfish Constable, with Select Board approval, that we could suspend or close the commercial shell fishery if there's any concerns of diminished shellfish stocks. And then for I think what you saw in your admin notes for the commercial mussel licenses, we were going to try and keep the commercial shellfish licenses to the calendar year, so they would expire December 31st each year and then be renewed. And that was pretty much it for the shellfish regulations. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
I do actually go back to the Shellfish Constable.
Madam Chair, can you mute yourself?
Here we go. If you could go back to D.
D. I think I only had these two.
Okay. The Shellfish Constable, with Select Board approval, may suspend or close the commercial shell fishery due to the concerns of diminished shellfish stocks. I think we should add with approval from the Harbor Committee or with their input from the Harbor Committee. I think we should add that to that language as well. Because although the Harbor Committee is advisory to the Select Board, so I think they should have a place at this table.
So are you suggesting with a recommendation from the Harbor Committee?
Yes.
Okay, we could add that in there. You know, typically on anything like this, we would involve Harbor Committee with those discussions as well.
So if we could add that in there, that would
Yep.
be fine.
We can do that? So with recommendation
Yep.
from the Harbor Committee or
Yep.
by the Harbor Committee?
Mr. Mahoney?
Chad, when you encounter or get to the point where you have a diminished shellfish stock, how does that happen? I mean, I know there's overfishing, but who's the one that throws up the flag on that and says, we're entering this period now where we have a problem here? Is that you, or is there biologists from the state? Who does that, and where does that data come from?
So typically, probably what would happen is it's no longer commercially viable. So they just get to a point where there's not enough there to commercially shellfish. And then at that point, with reports that are coming in, if they're not using their licenses, then we should probably take a look at, why, and maybe we close the shellfish area. You could do it either by area, or you could close that down completely and allow it to sort of replenish and restock. And then you would get to a point where you could possibly reopen it.
But there are reports and there's data.
Correct.
That, I mean, if you get to that point, that would back that up and help the Select Board of the Harbor Committee make those decisions.
Sure, yep.
Okay. Any other discussion? Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Yeah, motion to approve with amended language.
Yeah, with the amended language, I'm sorry.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can wait. Yeah, it's fine.
And now, the fire department. Chief Foley.
Madam Chair and members of the board, thank you very much for having us here tonight. This presentation is the comprehensive fire department study that was commissioned about a year ago with the idea of taking a look at all functions and aspects of the fire department, and was included as one of the goals and agendas for the select board for this past year. We started this process early in '22 and have had several Zoom calls, phone conversations, data analysis. Extensive data has been actually passed over to the Center for Public Safety Management. They actually came out and did a site visit back in July, I believe, and they went around to all 7 fire stations and hit every corner of Plymouth to just take a look at the town in itself and see what kind of response area that we had, what kind of coverage, deployment of resources. And they also looked at EMS and whether or not that was going to be a viable option in the future, or even currently, as a business that we could possibly look at getting into. I'll let him cover all of that, but I wanted to introduce Chief Joseph Pozzo. He was the principal for the study. Chief Pozzo is over 40 years of career in public service. Most recently served as the Director of Public Protection for Volusia County, Florida, where he provided executive leadership to the fire, EMS, emergency management, corrections, animal control, and beach safety divisions. Prior to that, he also worked as the Assistant Director of Human Resources for that county, and was the fire chief in there as well. And then prior to that, he was a fire chief in 2 other communities in Virginia. Chief Pozzo holds a master's degree in public administration from Troy University and a bachelor's in administration of public administration from St. Leo University, and holds numerous public safety technical certifications. Chief Pozzo.
Thank you, Chief Foley, and Madam Chair, members of the Select Board, Town Manager, Town Staff, and members of the public. Joe Pozzo with Center for Public Safety Management. A little bit about our company. We are the exclusive provider of public safety technical expertise to the International City-County Management Association. We do these studies all around the country and in Canada. And they really are predominantly fire and EMS analysis, law enforcement analysis. We do also do 911 center analysis. We assist municipalities and counties around the country with public safety chief selections, We've done over 400 studies in 46 states. The fire and EMS team that worked on this had hundreds of years of experience when you add it all up as practitioners, middle managers, and senior managers. The team, myself, Joe Pozo, that's Rondell Early in the back. He was a principal on the project as well. Matt Zavasky did the EMS portion of the study. We have a very robust data analysis team headed by Dr. Dove Chelst and Dr. Shanfang Lee, who is our principal data analysis. Monique Lee did all the GIS that you see in the report, and of course an editor that makes everything look as it did and gives us good presentation. So this report itself, significant components. First, an organizational analysis. That was the biggest piece of this, in that we looked at all of the programs in the Plymouth Fire Department: staffing, training, education, community risk reduction, which is fire prevention, your emergency communications, principally in the fire department, but then outwardly from that, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we get into this: emergency operations, emergency management, community risk analysis. As the chief pointed out, we went all around the town, looked at all of the risk. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight. But the important thing about the community risk analysis and why we do that is when you look at deployment and staffing for fire departments, it ties back to risk, and it specifically ties back to what the building risk is in your community. We looked at the fleet, did a full fleet analysis and a facility analysis. That was part of the scope of work. And we made some recommendations on station placements and renovations, and also did a pretty large EMS analysis as well, as the chief pointed out. So our methodology, we always start with a data analysis, and we included that in this study, which was a response time, workload. We look at resiliency, which is when you have multiple calls in a fire district, those overlapping calls, how are they handled, and do you have the resources to handle those? Ambulance transport, we did the full gamut on the ambulance transport. We looked at what the private service does here, their response times, how they're dispatched, what their ground transport times are, time on scene, time to the hospital, and all of that. It's all in the report. As the chief said, we held many virtual meetings. We were on site, spent a couple of days here. You have a beautiful town. And we were here in July, so we got the full sort of touristy thing. The lady who was talking about the herons, when you're in Florida in the wintertime, it's manatees, okay? It's all about the manatees that come in from the cold ocean, and they come into tributaries, and they get into the warm springs by the hundreds. So it attracts, you know, of course, many people, just like your herons do. So we have a connection there. We do a pretty extensive document review. The department provides us fire department documents, city documents. That all goes into the risk analysis and certainly the report. There's a couple of things you'll hear tonight that really tie back to staffing, and they tie back to where your stations are located. We use national benchmarking for that. First is National Fire Protection Association. That is an organization that is based here in Massachusetts, and they publish many standards for the fire service that run the gamut of the life safety code or the fire prevention code, to uniforms, to fleet, to facilities, to just about anything that's tied back to life safety and firefighting. And also the Insurance Services Organization, which is an organization that utilizes information from their analysis on how a community is prepared to combat building fires. And so you get a rating on that, and you have a community rating we'll go over that does and could have some impact on property insurance. So overall impressions, right? So we'll start with that. Plymouth Fire Department is an excellent fire and EMS agency. I can't say that enough. The people, You have a good leader with your fire chief who's been in office about a year now. So that succession plan is very strong at that level, but an excellent agency. Dedicated people. We gained a lot of input while we were here from all members of the organization, from the rank and file through the senior staff. They also enjoy strong support, certainly from the community, from the town administration, from the select board. We did find some gaps, however, when we measure those, when we measure response times, when we measure station placement, when we look at the staffing and how you do combat structural fires. However, it's nothing that we don't find when we do these studies throughout the country. And when we look at how your ISO report, some deficiencies that are there, what your deficiencies are very common across the country. When we look at response times and some of your gaps there, it's very common across the country. You have a reason why you have gaps. We'll go over that here. And it's just how the town was planned. It's how development was planned and where you placed your fire stations. We did provide recommendations. We provided 40 recommendations. We'll go over some of those, in depth tonight. Some of them I think we'll skim over. But it does provide a plan for you to sustain your fire and EMS service and maintain what you have going really positive for you now, and then as the town continues to grow, because you are growing and development is going to continue. And we think that certainly the fire department and the community will benefit from these recommendations. So, the ISO, or Insurance Services Organization, again, it's a company. Verisk is the head agency for Insurance Services Organization. They go all around the country and they establish ratings for communities. The ISO is not a rating for the fire department. That is a community rating because it involves water distribution, it involves the communications center, and it also involves the fire department. So it's a community rating because the fire department doesn't control the water system. That's your utilities department or your public works department. They do have control currently over the 911 center. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. You have and enjoy a Class 3 rating. The ratings are 1 through 10, with 1 being the highest rating. And you enjoy Class 3. That 3Y is just places where you have structures and buildings that are more than 1,000 feet from a credible water source or fire hydrant, but still within 5 miles of a fire station. So there you are, and that's how you compare nationally. And you're in the top tier. And typically, when insurance companies or agents look at risk and peril, and they look at the fire risk and peril, typically communities that are rated 1, 2, or 3 are looked to be, again, in that exceptional or higher rating, and there's not a lot of difference in that 1, 2, or 3. But again, fire peril is only one piece of insurance, so I will point that out. It's, you're a coastal community, so certainly coastal communities, when you're looking at risk, there is an equal or sometimes higher risk in coastal communities because of the perils that you have from that. Your fire department rating, I broke that out for you because that's the bigger piece and where some of those deficiencies are. And as you look at those, and we'll go over some of these, not unlike anywhere else in the country. Your deployment analysis, you have some deficiencies there, and that's how your engines and ladders are deployed around the town, and I'll show you that. We have a couple of graphics here that I can point that out to you. Your training, you have some deficiencies in training. Not that the men and women of the fire department aren't training, it's just the type of training that the ISO looks at and that they require. And so we have pointed those out and we've given you some recommendations on those. And then certainly the company personnel, You're about halfway there, which is very good. That's 7.62 out of 15. However, you still have some gaps there that we've given you some recommendations on and how you can improve. You can see how highly rated the communications center is. Although there are some issues with communications we'll cover, and that's with the PSAP, and that's just how the 911 calls are relayed and how they're received and the time that it takes to actually get a call in place, depending on where that call is coming from. And you have a very good water system. So other than the places and the structures that you have that could be more than 1,000 foot from a fire hydrant. The National Fire Protection Association standard that we're going to talk about is 1710. That's the standard that applies to Plymouth Fire because they are a career fire department. There's another standard that would apply to a predominantly volunteer fire department that is still has a staffing piece and a time piece, but it's much different than the 1710 standard because in a 1710 fire department, you're staffed around the clock. So that's how they look at that, and that's how they benchmark. So a couple of other things that you'll hear tonight also is effective response force and critical tasking. Effective response force is the amount of people that you can get to the scene of a building fire or a type of building fire, and then there are critical tasks that have to be performed as they arrived. Got a graphic, we'll go over that sort of, and I'll explain some of that to you. But those are two big pieces when you look at staffing. And then, of course, response times, that's just all the call processing, dispatch time, turnout time of the fire department, that's all measured, which there are some gaps there. And your travel time, which there are some gaps. But that's just really how this town was developed. And you've got a national forest, that sort of dissects north from south as well. So let's go to some of these graphics here. On the left is the National Fire Protection Association 1710 standard. That's the 242nd standard. So what that standard says is first arriving engine company on the scene in 4 minutes, okay? So these are the travel time bleeds from each of your fire stations. And you can see the red circles point out the gaps. The one that's shaded a little bit more in red, you have some increased demand there because you're already developing in that area. And then there is some development in some of those other areas, particularly down in Station 4's area, Bourne Road, and as you go north of that station, you're developing that. So that's where we picked up some of the gaps. The other two slides are the ISO benchmarks. So the one on the left with these sort of purplish or magenta circles, that's the ISO standard for engine companies, which says you should have an engine company every 1.5 miles of built-upon land. Built-upon meaning you have structures on that land. The slide to the right of that is for ladder companies, which says, the standard says you should have a ladder company every 2.5 miles of built-upon land. So the circles are a little bigger, and I just sort of, marked there where you have some deficiencies because you have some built-upon land where you don't have that service. But we are going to give you some recommendations on how you can improve that. Some of it more immediate with some current staffing that you already have. These are your response times. This is just a piece of the data that we ran for you. The NFPA standard measures this at the 90th percentile. The average is on the left, but we're just going to concentrate on what's on the right. And so there's a lot of different travel times in there, but I'll just bring you, and let's zero in on the structure fire travel time. The Plymouth Fire Department in the 1 year period that we study is 6.3 minutes. So you're not too far off from that 4-minute travel time. And then if you look up into some of the more critical EMS calls, breathing difficulty, cardiac and stroke, seizure and unconscious, you're running about the same type of, for the engine companies responding, you're running about the same type of travel time. And so I'm going to show you a demand map in a minute, so just sort of remember these response times, and you do cover right now where your greatest demand is in those 240-second bleeds. So, some key findings that we found here. One, as I mentioned already, PFD is a well-functioning and a very professional fire and EMS agency. I can't say enough about the professionalism of the department, and that's the rank and file right through to the fire chief's office. We did not hear ever a bad word about the town, about the agency, about anything. What we did hear was, we want more training. We need more training. Training was the number one thing that we heard while we were on the ground here. Training. We want to improve our training. We want to be as trained as we can get. So we don't hear that all the time when we go around and we do these studies. So we concentrated a lot on that training, and we looked into where their deficiencies are and provided some recommendations. You have a lot of service demands here, and you have a lot of risk in your community. So, you know, of course, you have EMS first response, fire, technical rescue, hazmat, transportation risk here. You've got a main road that runs through here, Route 3, State Route 3. And you've got a lot of, you know, we've given you some graphics there, just your motor vehicle accidents around town. So you have a lot of transportation risk. You have a lot of density challenges. You have a lot of building risk challenges with those density challenges. You have what we call vertical density. So when you go up with residential, anything more than 2 or 3 levels, that's vertical density. That creates a larger challenge for the fire service. Getting a hose line in place at the 3rd or 4th or 5th floor. You've got a lot of wood frame structures, just your prevailing winds here, anything on the coast presents a greater risk, and you have some coastal risk. When you get into Station 5's area along the coast, you actually have houses that are stacked 3, 4, 5, and 6 deep that go out onto the sand that don't have any roadway to them, that the engine companies or the ladder companies can't get to them. So it presents a different type of tactic for the fire service, and it actually takes a lot of people to get just the initial hose line in place on those. You've got a mass transit system using bus, wildland fires. They're out on one now tonight. Or I think the chief said we probably would have had some more firefighters here, but they're out on a wildland fire, so you have certainly a lot of that. And you know what happens in the dry season. So you have a lot of challenges here, but again, it's not unlike any other community. You just have the additional coastal challenges that an interior town or city or county would not have. Again, professional and dedicated folks and very positive fire department. And they have a very positive outlook on their future. Brewster Ambulance, well-established, well-respected ambulance, private ambulance service, provides EMS to you folks here in the town. And I can tell you we did not find anything unusual with how they provide that service. The only unusual things we really found connected to that is in the PSAP and how calls are received and transferred, and then how the fire department gets their calls. So I've said that a couple of times because I think that's a big deal. There are delays in calls at some times and how they're being routed. There are some gaps in the ISO we talked about, but training and staffing, but nothing that we don't see when we travel across the country. And your facility analysis, you just have gaps in service, but that's because you have the village concept here in the town and how you develop the town. So as you develop the village, a fire station went in. Well, now you're starting to develop outside of those villages, and that's going to create some response time challenges and deployment challenges as well. So the 911 system has multiple public safety answering points. If you're calling from a cell phone, it goes through the state, and the state gets the call, and then they transfer it to the proper community or the proper PSAP. Sometimes Brewster EMS gets a call, just direct to them. And then what they do is by radio, they radio to Plymouth Fire Department dispatchers and tell them they have an EMS call, what the call is, and then they dispatch the appropriate response pieces, either an engine or a ladder or both, or the rescue. Sometimes the 911 call, if it's in the town, goes to Plymouth Police Department, and then if it's an EMS call, they transfer it to Brewster, and then Brewster then transfers it again to the Plymouth Fire Department so they can dispatch an engine, or if it's a fire, goes from Plymouth Police, and then it just goes right to the fire department. The fire department, although they're a dispatch center, they really aren't a PSAP other than automatic alarms that come in from a street box or a fire alarm system in a building. That does create some delays, but we've made a recommendation on that, and it's already in progress. I think you've already acted on the 911 center, or you're thinking about just moving that along, and that's one of the best decisions I think you could have made, because the PSAP has to be central. Other than what the state does with the 911 calls, you're not going to be able to overcome that, but you can overcome the rest, and that's an important piece, okay? Because you don't want delays in that. Somebody calls 911, that's an emergency. You need to get the proper resources going as quickly as you can. Chief Master Mechanic, can't say enough about that gentleman. I don't see him here tonight, and I wish he was. Can't say enough about him and what he does, and what the mechanic, two mechanics, there's three mechanics do with him. We took a whole tour of his shop, and he took the time with us, and what he does there to keep the fire apparatus moving and running, because you run a lot of EMS calls and you run a lot of fire calls. You're a busy fire department, and just what he does and what he's able to do just in his shop saves you a lot of money, and it keeps those engines and ladders running longer than typically what other communities would run. And he's very proud of what he does, and he should be. So I can't say enough about what he does. Your workload, nothing here is atypical to what we see across the country. False alarms, or fire alarms really is what they are, automatic fire alarms that just don't turn into anything. It's just a malfunctioning alarm, or somebody pulls a street box, are your highest, right? About 39% of all of your fire-related calls. And then as you sort of trickle down, public service calls, those are calls for lockouts or a wire down, or I think something's going on. I smell smoke, I think, but I don't see anything, right? Those are those sort of sending somebody out just to check. And then when you get into structure fires and outside fires, you can see the count there. Those are typically the lower percentage calls, and you do run more of the false alarms or fire alarms and public service type calls in fire. EMS, again, nothing atypical there. Illness and other are typically the highest everywhere we go, and that's about 33% of all of your EMS-related calls, and then falls and injuries and things such as that. So your workload is not atypical, but you have a very busy workload, and you can see calls per day in fire are 10, calls per day in EMS are 18, so you're up around 19 or 20 calls per day. So we talked about the demand, and I put that 240-second map there. That's the NFPA standard, the green. So where you see green by your street network and the speeds, we use ArcGIS, so we're able to capture the speed limit of the roads. You can see that where your heaviest demand is, you have your stations, right? They're properly placed. And they can get to areas of your heavier demand in that 240 seconds. But you can see your development is moving out and away from the sort of village concept down south, and what you have already in place, along the coast. So you have to start thinking in the future as you continue to develop. I know there's some consideration on moving Station 1, and we looked at that, or potentially moving Station 4, and we've looked at that, and we gave you all of that data and what that would look like. But you've got some other gaps that really you have to close in between what is really in the north, east, I guess that is, up there where headquarters station is, and Station 2 and Station 7, and we're right there in the middle of Station 3. There's a gap in there that you're developing, and so there has to be some consideration in the future as the demand continues for placing a fire station there for timely response. So recommendations, we're just going to move through these 40 recommendations, and we can tie some of it back. First one has to do with emergency management, and really that is just to make sure that the comprehensive emergency management plan is updated and revised on a buy-in. Yes, ma'am.
I'm 40. I'm still stunned at 40.
Recommendations?
Yes.
Oh, well, let me talk about those just quickly. There's 40, but some of them are just the basic recommendations. I'm going to just talk about the ones that have some real meaning here, but it doesn't, if I'd have done 10, it doesn't mean that you're any less than if it was 40, really. And any of the staffing recommendations or any of that, we've given you those incrementally, or anything that has to do with funding. We've tried to give you alternatives on those as well. But 40 doesn't mean that that's a bad grade.
I understand that.
Okay. If it means there's a lot, then I'm going to go as quickly as I can through
That
it.
would be great.
Yes, ma'am. So
Thank you.
the first one is just keep that plan updated on a biannual basis. Second, just begin the process of preparing a continuity of operations plan. Those are very important in communities to ensure that there's no interruption in any services or staffing. You have some, there are some technology pieces in the fire department that we've talked to the chief about. One is just staff scheduling. There's digital staff scheduling programs to get him out of the notebooks that they use. And just things like email addresses for all employees so they can keep the communication gap as low as they can, training, records management systems, and update their policies. There's ways you can update policies now, digital. The ISO, we talked about training, and we also talked about the risk and the deployment analysis. Community risk reduction, again, very dedicated fire marshal's office. They're very busy, though. They have many inspections that they have to, they're required to do on an annual basis every year, and to get businesses open. And they also do a lot of plans review. So we've just recommended in the near term to midterm an additional fire inspection, or just at the minimum, a part-time inspector to help them with the annualized inspections to make sure that they can get through all of those because they're required. And then you have all the other inspections that aren't annual that they do on a biannual or triannual basis that they're trying to get to. So that's to assist with the workload in that division. Training, that was the number one piece from the men and women that we talked to on the ground. And that's getting the training done that needs to get done for not just incumbents, but for the new hires. So we've got a recommendation there for that, and a digital platform for training as well that helps the incumbents, particularly with the with their fire training hours that's required and their EMS hours that are required. We recommend that as much as possible, get the staff to the National Fire Academy. They've got excellent programs there, particularly the Executive Fire Officer Program for chief officers and senior management. There's no cost to you other than the meal ticket. National Fire Academy reimburses the town for the travel, and they stay on campus for free. So all you have to do is buy them a meal ticket and give them the time off. Recommend task books for firefighters, drivers, company officers, battalion chief, and above. When they get promoted, it helps them, it lays out the expectations for new employees and for new officers, just a piece of the training that we talked about. And annualized skill proficiency evaluations, not to be punitive, but it's just more of the multiple drills, multi-company drills and proficiency drills. It's things that the chief can lay out to get them even more training with each other. Again, high-intensity training on all the subjects that are required. One of the things that you're deficient in, and the chief and I talked about this the other day, is you don't have a burn building. ISO requires 18 hours a year. Every firefighter goes through live burn training, okay? So you don't have that available, and it's not close. Massachusetts Fire Academy, you can get a mobile unit in here, but it has to be scheduled, and there really isn't any guarantee that you can do that. So there's other types of training you can do. We talked about that for just any buildings that become available, not to burn, but buildings that you can train in and drill in. So we've recommended that to the chief as well. But those are just hours that they have to have, and it's required, and that's just that redundant training that the fire service does. Also, just in the mid to long term, some funding to develop and construct some training facility. If there's land available, you can also consider that when you build a new fire station. If you build a new fire station, if there's any land available, where you can put props on there for personnel. Performance measures for call processing times in the 911 center. You saw what your data was there. It's more than double what the NFPA standard is. But if you have compliance in there and you have some performance measures, at least the people who are processing the calls are aware, and they have a goal that they are trying to meet and achieve through compliance. We talked about the PSAP. We talked a little bit about this. This is already in place, moving the 911 center into the county center and having them be the primary PSAP for 911 calls, and then dispatching fire and EMS from there. This is your fire alarm division, who has many miles of cable above ground, below ground, boxes, pull boxes, fire alarm boxes, etc., that he maintains. And so this is a recommendation because of his workload to fund at least at minimum a part-time position at a technician level that can come in and assist him with that. Fire apparatus replacement plan, just a plan to meet the NFPA 1901 standard. These here you're already doing, so it's just to look at refurbishing apparatus, perhaps before you buy it, and not keeping any apparatus in service over 25 years, which is the NFPA 1901 standard. It just goes through, that standard changes about every 7 years, and they put multiple safety standards and benchmarks in there for apparatus, and this just keeps you up to date and keeps that apparatus safe as it's traveling the roads, and it protects the firefighters. Again, These are things that the chief master mechanic already does, and it just has to do with pumps, aerial ladders, and just the testing and the maintenance that goes into those. A fleet records management system. One of the things that the fire department really doesn't have is a records management system for fleet. They have it in books and on paper, but they don't have it in a place where multiple people can go in and look, so it's not digital. So this is just a recommendation to make that digital. And the same with your light vehicles, just to come up with a grading schedule for those, the same as the chief master mechanic has for fire apparatus and command cars. You have a marine firefighting vessel now, and the recommendation here is just maintain it, establish and maintain your operating guidelines, and make sure that you have proper cross-staffing on that, or people who are trained to run that boat. Succession planning. You've got a new chief, so that was some very good succession planning there. The recommendation is just keep that up. That's very important, and that's just for everybody collectively to work together. The IFF with the chief's office, human resources, and develop a succession plan. And we laid out some different benchmarks in the report to help the chief with that. Effective response force, we talked about this, your 240 seconds. You received a SAFER grant in 2018 for staffing for the heavy rescue truck. And that is to keep that in service 24/7, 365. That's not the case currently. That staffing is utilized to cover overtime and leave. So our recommendation is, because you got a SAFER grant, which is a federal grant, that you use that grant for how it was written, and you put that unit in service, and you keep it in service 24/7. That's a valuable piece of equipment, particularly where it's located at Station 3, which is sort of in the middle of the town. It can go north, south, east, or west with a full crew. So our recommendation is to put that unit in service, and for the chief to look at the staffing and what the funding impacts will be on that. But you already have the funding to man that. And so you can look there. The bigger circle in the middle is where Station 3 would be. That's your heavy rescue. And that's your 8-minute travel time, north, south, east, and west, so it can cover a lot of ground. And it adds to the effective response force. There's your effective response force for a single-family dwelling. That's just a visual there of 17 people. That's the requirement. You send now 10, 1 battalion chief, 2 engines, and an aerial. If you add the heavy rescue into that, then you'd be getting 13. That's why our recommendation is that you respond that heavy rescue on all structure fires or all multi-unit calls. You have a ladder at Station 5 that is cross-staffed with an engine. Our recommendation is that ladder goes out first due on all structure fires, not the engine. It does have, it carries hose and water. It's a quint, so it can be used either as a ladder or an engine. And that's near term. We feel as if you should do that as quickly as you can. Your facility plan to relocate Station 1, continue to look at that. However, when you relocate Station 1, you need to be cognizant of moving it from its current area because you have heavy demand there and you're building risk. So you just got to be careful how far you pull that from where it is, because you're going to create gaps that you don't have now, again, in a heavy demand area. And certainly continue with Station 4 and what your plans are for that. You saw where the demand was there, and you're already developing that area north and west of that. That's just a visual there of what the new stations would look like. The first, if you look at those two on the right, the one on the left there, O'Berry Street, and that intersection there where you would move it, you can see the gap that's created. That's the red circle. And then if you move it to Long Pond, which covers that newly developed area where you have some additional demand, but now you're taking that station away where you have heavy demand along the coast and the downtown area where we are here tonight. So there's some give and take on that, but that's just a decision, right, that you just have to make. Our recommendation is try to rebuild that, or if you're going to move that very close to where it is, and you're going to have to think about that Long Pond area for a station in the future anyhow, because you already have development there and you have high demand. Talked about Station 4. This next recommendation is just a ladder at Station 7. It's either leave it at Station 7, you can potentially move it to Station 2, but it needs to be staffed. And so there's just additional staffing there over the long term to consider staffing that with an officer and 2 firefighters on each of the shifts. And either at Station 7 or Station 2, really where the chief feels it should be. Either location will serve the purpose for both districts. Station 4, you're going vertical there. We saw a lot of the new construction in that area, and over the longer term, a ladder certainly at that station, because you don't have a ladder company in the southwest portion of the town, and you need one. EMS, just very quickly, first recommendation there is just upgrade the EMS training for all the Plymouth Fire Department personnel, from medical first responder to EMT basic. You run a lot of EMS calls, so there should be some gradual implementation of that. And then these other ones are really devoted to how the PSAP is set up now. Brewster gets a call, they send it over to Plymouth Fire. Plymouth Fire runs all of the EMS calls now. We took a pretty deep dive into that, and there are calls that are of a lower acuity that typically fire departments are running less and less across the country. And so our recommendation is that the PSAP at Brewster, at least, use their priority medical dispatch, which is a system that prioritizes call, and reduce the amount of response, or the number of calls that Plymouth Fire is responding on. Excuse me. 34 is tied into that last recommendation about priority medical dispatch. And let's see here, 36, mobile integrated health system or community paramedicine program could benefit this community, so we've made a recommendation on that. That is where when you have repeat callers or people who are frequently being transported by EMS, instead of sending an ambulance all the time, a mobile integrated health system or community paramedicine system just goes by their house. They check on them, they make sure that they're okay, they make sure they're taking their medications, because that's typically what the issues are. So it saves an ambulance transport, and it saves fire department response, so you're just reducing EMS calls overall. That's just a figure that just goes over the different types of calls. The Alpha, Bravo, and Omega fire departments shouldn't be responding to. Only the higher acuity calls, Charlie, Delta, and Echo. This is just for the EMS system, just to publish their clinical measures, be more transparent with that, and patient experiences. A lot of EMS systems will, after transport, they will send a survey out, and larger systems, the more contemporary systems will publish those so that the public can see and you can see how that ambulance service is doing. Just an example there of and that's another example of just the different critical calls, what the goal is, what the goal on scene time is, did they meet the goal, et cetera. One of the things that we did find is in the contract that you have with Brewster, they are a level of effort, meaning they'll just tell you how many units that they have in the town. A more contemporary contract would be a performance-based. That's based on response times, it's based on clinical measurement that you as a board sets through an agreement, and then you measure that on a monthly basis. So there's compliance in there as well. And last but not least, we don't think you should initiate a town-based EMS system through fire. We costed it for you. There's substantial cost in that, just substantial cost in perpetuity with personnel, and there's substantial cost in that as a startup cost. You're doing fine as a fire department. That's all I have.
Can I say something?
Thank you. Go ahead, Charlie.
Just quickly, thank you for that last comment, because that's been, it's kind of been controversial a little bit. In fact, we had somebody that ran on it was part of his campaign, was he wanted to change the EMS system, that we should have our own ambulances, and I'm glad you just pointed that out, that it wouldn't be cost-effective, and you're happy with that ambulance service. So thank you for that. And the other thing, Chief, a lot of the training I know you're working on, because I know we worked on the last contract about getting everybody up to speed with training, and so I know that's something that you're working on now. The dispatch situation, that the new system, that's going to be in place in a few months. So I think we're making some strides already with your recommendations.
The one improvement on your EMS is just look at the contract.
Yep.
We gave you, I think, a good recommendation, more performance level rather than level of effort. And I think that cures, what the EMS issue would be.
Your credentials are certainly, you have a lot more credentials than I do, so I had no clue about that. Thank you for answering that question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Mahoney.
Joe, thanks for keeping that under an hour.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Even though you only had 30 minutes, I just want to point that out.
Just a couple of things early in the presentation, and you were talking about the response time of 240. There was a slide a lot before this one that indicated that in some areas, the village concept was an impediment to getting to the 240. Is there a explanation behind that?
It's just how you built it out. Really, that's it. As you developed around the forest, and as you probably moved from north to south down Route 3, and you started to develop along the coast, it was just pieces, right? We're going to develop this area, we're going to zone it this way, but we're going to need a fire station.
Okay. All right, so second question, and you talked about a potential new Station 1, and I think you had 3 different maps up there. So one of them was, if it's built where it currently is, or in a close proximity, you don't lose any coverage, correct?
No, sir.
But if you go to Oberry or Long Pond Road, you create this gap,
Yes, sir.
I believe, just north of here, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Where you have a lot of risk.
Correct. Yes, I know, it's very dense up there. So, no,
But I also know that it's tough, right? I mean, you have to make a decision. What do we do with what we have? Or if we move it, there's probably not a lot of choices of places to move it. So, I mean, I realize that too. Our job is just to tell you, you've got a lot of risk here, so just be cautious how far you move it from the risk.
and of course, if you move it from the risk, how do you mitigate that response time? So,
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think we could learn lessons from actually the build of Town Hall, that we could have taken over Lincoln Street and taken over the hotel there and had just as nice of a town hall for about $30 million less. And we do have 3 residents that are right beside the Station 1 fire station that we should really start considering reaching out and maybe asking if they'd be interested in departing with their property. Anyone else? Mr. Chandler, I know you have to come up to the podium. Mhm.
Yeah.
This is prime time, Phil.
No, I was just curious, I had a question on the rankings.
Can you please state your name for the record?
Phil Chandler. Where'd he go?
Yes, sir.
So the question I had is that on the rankings, how it was like the community was a 3 out of 10. There was an 8.
Can you please speak into the microphone? Thank you.
There was an 8A and a B. So it was like 1 through 10, but there was an 8A and B, and I was wondering why that was.
It is, as you move farther down, it really has to do with 2 things. How far are you from a fire station? And then how far are you from a credible water source? And so as you get into the A's and the B's, that's where they start to segregate that out. Just like they've segregated here, you're a 3 in the area where everybody's within 5 miles of a fire station and within 1,000 feet of a credible water source. As you get away from that, you're still a 3 because you're within 5 miles of a fire station, but you're not within 1,000 feet of a credible water source. So that's how the ISO breaks that down. The 8 doesn't apply here.
I was just wondering, so it's really 3 out of 11 or 3 out of 11?
No, it's still 10, but some of them have letters that correspond with where you are. You could be within 1,000 feet of a credible water source, but more than 5 miles from a fire station.
You're talking to a numbers guy. So, are there any more questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Chief. Do you have something else you'd like to say?
No, I just wanted to say thank you. I know that was a lengthy presentation, but I think it was important for us to share our study results with the board and with the town, because it's going to start a lot of interesting conversations, obviously. There was a lot of information and recommendations that were made that, quite frankly, we were already aware of a lot of these challenges. We were already aware of some of these deficiencies that were out there, and we were already in the works of addressing them. But it's nice having this package now, one document that we can refer to and reference when we're having these conversations in the future. And I look forward to meeting a lot of these challenges as we move forward. So thank you very much.
And I'm sure you will.
Yes.
Madam Chair, can I just ask the chief a question? Thank you. All right, Neil. So we've been waiting for this report for a while. It's here, very comprehensive. So obviously you do have other, you just secured some incremental property for State Road for one of your stations. So we got things going on out in West Plymouth. What's our timeline with respect to you making a decision, apparently, maybe with the town manager on the future of Station 1?
Yeah, I'll have to get with the town manager and the finance director. We'll have to have some, substantive conversations about that subject. But we also have a lot of other large projects on the plate right now. So I think we have enough to focus on at the moment, but we do need to start that planning process as well on what our next moves are going to be as far as Station 1 or potentially an additional station within the town.
Yep, okay. Thank you, Chief.
Joe, I'd just like to thank your team. That report was fantastic. And Chief, when I was running for selectman, I wanted to, get some information, familiarize myself with some of the buildings in Plymouth. And I toured the fire stations. And I'll tell you what, I learned so much about the fire department and what you do, what your department does. I see Brian from the union out there Brian toured it with us and with the former chief. We have a unique town, and I'm glad, I hope a lot of residents watch tonight to listen to this report. We have a unique town we have 7 fire stations. Not a lot of towns have that many stations. We have 134 miles of land to cover. We have 36 miles of coast. You know, we have, one station on a shift, I think the former chief told us, they had in the course of one shift, they had a house fire, a boat fire, an electric fire at the power plant. They had to go out on Route 3 for the jaws of life to take somebody out, and they had a boat fire down the canal. That was one shift, all those different scenarios. And that's, so, you know, when people see, like when you go before a town meeting and all the equipment that you need for the fire department, there's a reason for that. Because we need all these different trucks, we need brush trucks, we need pump trucks. I think only 60% of the town has fire hydrants. So we don't have water in, I believe, 40% of our town. So we need those pump trucks. So it's just amazing the job you guys do. And I hope that we can keep, if you need the training, that we can get grant money so we can afford to do that. Or if we can't afford not to train you. So I hope, Brian, I hope you keep requesting training for you guys. I know the chief is 100% in with you. So anyway, commend you. I learned so much tonight in that 1 hour. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Derek, could you put that on the town website so folks can take a look at it?
Oh, yeah, we have to do that, yeah.
Great. All right, I'm just going to do a quick license permits and administrative notes. Unless there is something specific that the board has questions on, I'd ask for a motion to move as a group.
I motion we move as a group.
Was there, first by Mr. Helm, seconded by Mr. Blitzer. Discussion? All those in favor? So carried. Unanimous. The next order of business is the mooring wait list.
Can you please unmute yourself?
Again, Chad Hunter, Plymouth Harbor Master. So what you have before you tonight are some recommendations to change the waterway regulations, which deal with the mooring waiting list renewal period. So we have some quick things to go over. What is a mooring waiting list? So the mooring waiting list is required by state law, and it's a list that basically creates fair and equitable assignment of mooring space in Plymouth Harbor. We have about anywhere from 400 to 600 people waiting on the list for anywhere from 6 to 10 years, depending on the size of boat that they're requesting. And approximately 20 to 40 of those are assigned by turnovers, so somebody gives up their mooring, and then that goes to the next person on the list with the appropriate size boat. And each year, we have about 70 to 90 people that do not renew their applications, and that renewal process is sort of open January 1st of every calendar year and runs to February 28th. So they get approximately 2 months to come in or pay online, make sure all of their information is current and up to date, and then they get renewed for that next calendar year. So the process, the renewal process, to dive in a little more detail on that, mooring renewals are due by February 28th. So at midnight on February 28th, the renewal period closes. If an applicant does not renew by February 28th, they are removed from the list. I mentioned 70 to 90 people that don't renew every year. Not all of those are intentional. Some people move out of town. Some people, give up on the wait in some cases. But there's always, at the end of every renewal period, there's always a handful of people that just miss the deadline. And, in some cases, they could have been on the list for 3, 4, 5 years, and now they're going back on the list at the bottom. So, pretty upsetting for not only them, but for us as well, to see somebody sort of lose that time and on the waiting list. The harbor bylaw, so Chapter 81, and the waterway regulations kind of provide the background to the waiting list renewal and assignment methods. So we have a couple of amendments that we're looking to do. And this was all in consultation with the town manager and harbor committee. I think we discussed this at the February 9th meeting. And I think there was some subcommittee discussions on this as well. But this waterway regulation, section B2, so again, you have the existing language on the top in black, which specifies that renewal period of January 1st to February 28th, and the recommended replacement language below, which does a couple of things. So we're extending the renewal period January 1st to March 1st, because we have a lot of people that come in on March 1st thinking that they've made it, and unfortunately they have not. So there's been quite a bit of confusion about February 28th, and then if you throw in leap year, that really gums things up even more. So we decided to go January 1st to March 1st as the renewal period, and that would be each calendar year. And then actually extending or giving like a second chance option with a demand fee added from March 2nd to March 15th, where a demand notice would be mailed or emailed to anybody that hasn't renewed by the March 1st deadline. And it gives them that option to say, oh, wow, I missed that. I still want to be on the list, and they get that second chance. So we discussed that at the harbor committee level and with the town manager, and I think everybody thought that that was a fair way of giving people that second chance. So this language incorporates that. I'm not going to read through it exactly, but ultimately it also puts it on the harbor master office to release the list by April 1st. So once we're done with renewals, March 15th at midnight, we would then go through the list. Anybody that's assigned or did not renew would be removed from the list, and then we will post a new list where people can see where they stand on that new list. And we would do that by April 1st. There were a couple of other sections here that we wanted to address. So section B3, again, the information that we have, this is how we get a hold of, these people with either mailing addresses, so mailing invoices, phone numbers, or email addresses. So we wanted to make sure that they were responsible for keeping that information up to date. This is probably I would say probably the second reason we see people that don't renew. They'll move, and they won't let us know that they've moved. So when we mail out an invoice to them to renew, they're not getting that. We get a lot of return mail every year, and we do our due diligence to try and find those people by either notifying them by email or phone, getting their address updated, and then getting that out to them. But basically put the responsibility on them that if they move or anything changes, that they keep us up to date. And the last one, this is a little off topic, but it was in the section that we were looking at. And this is really looking to clarify the turnover process for mooring holders. So we're looking to add some clarity to this. The top section is the existing language, and I think where the confusion lies, because the town regulation, it basically talks to selling their ground tackle, which is the block and the chain and the ball, at fair market value. So we get a lot of people that look to the town to sort of broker their turnover or their mooring gear to the next person. And we wanted to clarify that the town's not in the position to broker deals, but from one previous owner to a new owner. And we kind of point them in the direction of the mooring service providers in this case. So they are the ones that should be handling these sort of transactions. They're the ones that are doing the inspections to make sure the gear is safe when it's turned over. So this one, I think, just adds some clarity to the transfer process and sort of points them into the direction of the mooring service provider to either assess the used gear or place a new mooring in that location. So I think that's all of the changes that we recommended. The last topic, and Phil Chandler, the chair of the Harbor Committee, is here. We had these discussions at the February meeting. Currently, the mooring renewals are $10 annually. So to get on the list, it's free. Whenever you renew, you pay $10. There was some discussion about increasing that fee to $20 with the stipulation that there was a harbor revolving fund that the additional $10 fee would go into. We don't have any existing harbor revolving fund at this time, so that might be something that we want to postpone. But the mooring application demand fees, so these are the people that have missed the renewal period. So from March 2nd to March 15th, the question was where we wanted to set that demand fee. And I think Harbor Committee came up with a $200 demand fee. So that's what's in front of you today for a recommendation. And I think that was it. Yep. So more than happy to answer any questions. Like I said, the chair of the Harbor Committee is here if you have any questions for them.
I have a couple questions. First of all, I remember, because I am the liaison to the Harbor Committee, that back in the fall, we had discussed a $100 demand fee, and everybody was good with that. I won't support a $200 demand fee. It's very punitive. You only have a short period of time, less than 2 weeks. And you have to think about, some people only get paid monthly. So how are they going to pay that kind of money, whether it's 1 or 2 moorings in a family? That's like $400. It would be nearly impossible. So I'd like to recommend that we reduce that fee to $100, to the $100 that we originally agreed to back in the fall. Now, I do realize that this is something to put out there. But I also think that if we are going to do anything like this, that we should be sending out notification that your harbor or mooring waiting list is coming up for renewal. Not just hit people with, well, it's this time, and if you don't pay it, it's $200 because you missed the time. So we have plenty of people that $20, I don't have a problem with it going up to $20, but that $20 could cover mailing to everybody on the list, the mooring waiting list, excuse me, to let them know that, your mooring fees are coming up, because there is no communication out there about these mooring fees. And it's not on social media. It's nowhere that I've seen, and I know originally I was on the list for 11 years before we got our mooring, and my kids are on the mooring list, and we missed by a day 5 years ago, and were taken off the list and down the bottom when they were in actually the teens of getting their moorings. But for me, I believe that $200 is way too much money. Mr. Helm.
You all right?
Just for clarification, I think that Betty just did that, but I'm just going to ask you, Chad, to clarify. There is no reminder of the old February 28th or now the March 1st deadline for payment of their mooring list fee?
There is. So every
Okay.
year, we send out invoices to everybody that's on the waiting list, and they receive them on or about January 1st.
So we do send
We
notification.
do, we do. We send an invoice, and then they're able to either pay that here at Town Hall, they can pay at the office, or they can pay online.
Okay. Where, because I do remember the $100 demand notice penalty, and, you know, and perhaps Mr. Chandler can address this. How did we go from 100 to 200? And because I will agree with the chair that it seems unnecessarily punitive.
So as the discussion ensued, it went to 200 because we talked about a couple of things. One was the expense and one was the date. And the reason why we couldn't go beyond the March 15th is at some point, you start pushing that out too far and then it.
Understood. You have.
Well, no, it affects the temp moorings for the summer.
No, I agree,
And, you
I
know, so
understand that.
but what we also wanted to do was not to make it punitive to the point where it didn't weigh on the administration of the harbor master, where we didn't want people to actually do it again. So as the numbers came out, $50 was too low because we figured that people would just start paying $50 and say, I'll just wait, and then we'd have a problem at March 15th now as opposed to March 1st. So I talked about it earlier. We don't have a problem with the 100. It was just, you know, it was $200 just to make it punitive, so it wouldn't happen to discourage people from using that as a service.
Thank you.
And also, if I could point out too, that on the $10 towards the revolving fund, it had been discussed to put that towards training and safety as well. So,
Mr. Blatzer.
Thank you, Phil. You answered my question about 200, 100. Chad, I got a couple questions for you. I constantly hear about the moorings. How do you get a mooring? And then I hear about how long the waiting list is. So we have a serious supply and demand for moorings. So my question is, and I had to step out for a second when you started your presentation, so I may have missed it, but what happens if a mooring sits empty? And how long, if it sits empty for a season?
So currently, they have a year, and that could be due to medical condition, boat breakdowns, a whole number of issues where they would notify us and say, you know, I'm not able to use the mooring, and we give them that year.
Okay.
Obviously, through COVID, little different story. We gave people a year and 2 years that weren't comfortable getting back into, you know, boating and being on launches and around people. So we did extend that a little bit due to the circumstances.
Right.
But typically, it's 1 year. If they're not going to use their mooring for the year, we then go to the waiting list and assign somebody on a temporary basis. So while they're waiting, they get the use of a mooring for a season to kind of help with that wait, essentially. So we do try and utilize those empty moorings by other people that are on the waiting list.
So you do utilize them?
Correct, yep.
Okay. So currently, how many you think sat empty last summer?
Good question. We get kind of a revolving time period and, you know, a snapshot at any point along the way. You know, there's always empty moorings. You have people that will sometimes go in late in the season, stay in late, people that go in early, come out early. Then you have people that cruise and do different things. So we usually have an inventory of empty moorings. I would say anywhere from probably 15 to 20% at any given time.
Well, I would encourage you to really, if you could kind of take a look, and if you see these moorings being empty and people aren't using them, to really, you know, take them back and give them to the people on this long, it's what, a 10-year waiting list? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's 6 to 10 years, yeah.
Yeah, so I would like to see more people be able to, I mean, I'm not a boat owner myself, but I would like to see more people be able to utilize our beautiful harbor.
Yeah,
So-
the temporary assignments have been very well received, you know, and for, you know, to kind of shorten that period, if somebody has to wait 6 to 10 years, if they're able to get 2 or 3 years of a temporary to kind of cushion that a little bit, it helps. And it's, you know, essentially it supports marine fuel. They're not able to get a tender, so they have to use the launch
Right.
system. So it helps everybody in
The whole
harbor.
economy down there.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so, Yep. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chad, I remember a few years ago, you made a presentation when we were going through the dredging process, which was a couple of phases, and, the plan you had in place with respect to, shifting the moorings and putting them back. So is everything settled out there?
Yeah, we've still been dealing with some people that want to move. They don't necessarily like where they ended up.
Post-dredging.
But everybody is accounted for, everybody is in. We've had some turnover since. And, we really didn't end up with any more moorings.
That was my next question. Any possibility of expansion? No.
We can look in some of the flats areas, which are not necessarily popular if you have a larger boat, but if you have like a smaller boat that's shallow draft, that we could potentially add some. But yeah, we'd have to take a look at that. I think, we definitely have a more orderly harbor. If you kind of look out there, you can see the rows and the way it was designed, and that was to help with wayfinding. So if somebody's visiting in Plymouth Harbor, now we have sort of a grid where you can give them, E5, and it actually tells you where that would be, versus before they were all sort of just scattered throughout the harbor.
So I know this has been a sensitive issue, comes and goes. Occasionally you get some very, irate people with respect to the process. So I certainly like the fact that there is basically a new 2-week grace period put in.
Sure.
I agree with the chair. $200 is a big number. Whether it's 50, 100, or 200, where does that money end up?
So I believe all that money goes to the general fund.
Oh, God. Okay, so I don't know if there's a motion forthcoming, but certainly 200 right now seems like a very large starting point.
Sure.
Anyone else? So I'd like to make a motion to reduce that $200 fee to a $100 demand fee. And until the renewal, until we have the revolving fund or whatever it is that we have, I don't think we should be raising fees to $20 unless we have someplace to put it. So if you're telling me we have someplace to put it, then that's a whole different story.
Yes, in the general fund.
We don't like the general fund, do we, John?
No, we don't.
See, the problem, if I could just talk about that just for a minute, because the finance director and I, we've had this conversation on multiple occasions, and the concern is every time you start earmarking fees in this situation, you start pulling away revenue sources from, and taking away the town's ability to finance town operations. So in this situation, I think what the finance director would recommend is, let's look at that sum of money, that additional revenue, and then just create a line item within the operating budget. So this way, you're not creating a special account for it, but you're just creating a line item in the operating budget for a specific purpose using those revenues. So it ends up becoming a net zero proposition to the budget.
Mr. Helm?
Along those lines, Chad, how many people are on the list?
I would say probably about 500 people.
500, so that's $5,000.
Correct.
Yeah.
That, well, under 20, at 10. At 10, it's $5,000. At 20, it's $10,000 that would be earmarked and not go to the general fund, correct?
Well, there would be a line item.
If this were created, if this
Yeah.
were...
Well, I would say that the
To the
delta.
town manager, what is the difference between a line item and a revolving fund?
What ends up happening is if those fees are deposited into the general fund, then through the annual budget process, we could create a specific line item in the harbor master's budget using X number of dollars that are generated from that revenue source. A special revenue account or revolving fund takes those dollars directly away from the general fund and places them in an account that can only be used for that very specific purpose.
But aren't you proposing a similar thing with a line item under
Right, but
revolving
a
fund?
revolving
Is that
or a
basic?
special account or a revolving account basically becomes permanent. If it's in the operating budget during lean years, it can be removed. So it's a way to help reduce the operating budget during lean years, like say this past year.
So it's a way to earmark, a line item is a way to earmark money unless we decide to change our minds suddenly.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, Charlie?
I think $100 is fair for that, but if they recommend a $20 fee from 10 to 20, the Harbor Committee recommends that too. I'm all for that. I think that's $20 for mooring. That's, I think that's pretty cheap, and
It's $20 to be on the list, not for a mooring.
to be on the list,
Yeah. Just to be on the waiting list.
or just for the waiting. But don't you get a mooring with that too?
No.
No. Unless you get assigned a temporary, then yes, but ultimately, it's just to secure your place on the list, and you pay that every year.
Well, I still think it's fair, so I would go with the 20.
Okay. So the motion is to reduce the demand fee to $100 and to allow the renewal to be $20.
Does this motion also include the other changes that Chad suggested to the wording,
Oh.
including March 1st and all those on the three other slides?
Yes. So it would be everything as presented, except the demand fee would only be $100 and the renewal fee would be the $20.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
To the town manager, Derek, I understand the concerns that you have and the finance director has with respect to, earmarking, and you've got to pick your spots, I completely agree, but having gone through, attended some meetings in the last year with Mr. Hunter and others in the Harbor Master Committee members and the Lobstermen's Association with respect to the potential cruise liner coming in here, I do know that some of the concerns that were voiced at some of these meetings was, not having a proper funding line item with respect to certain needs that, they'd like to see in the budget. So I'm certainly supportive of that, and hopefully we can get that done next year.
Anyone else? Called for vote? All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next is the town manager's report.
All right. Good evening, everybody. So I want to start with some really good news. One of our town employees by the name of Parker Cody, I want to congratulate him publicly for finishing the Boston Marathon yesterday. I know it was something that he had strived to do the last couple of years, and for whatever reason, he wasn't able to participate. So he was able to participate yesterday and finish the Boston Marathon, I think around 4 hours. So great job by Mr. Cody. Just as we head into the pavement management season, I wanted to bring to the board's attention, one, we're going to be starting a number of roads this coming week. One in particular, though, I know has brought a lot of attention is Rocky Hill Road, so that's actually starting, I think it's already started. But so for the public that's listening, I want to let folks know that if you're interested where your street is, the engineering department will be posting a list on the website of all the roads that will be paved this coming summer season, so look out for that. A couple announcements. This coming Saturday and Sunday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Camelot Drive, the DPW will be holding its tree debris removal program. So for residents, just bring an ID, and they'll take any brush or any leaf debris from your home this coming Saturday and Sunday. Also, this weekend, the Drug Take Back Day and Shops Disposal Program will be taking place at 20 Long Pond Road, which is a police station, and at Cedarville Fire Station, again, at 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's a Drug Take Back Day and the Shops Disposal Program. You may be aware that we had done an analysis of Town Wharf. There was some structural repairs that needed to be made, And so last week, you may have seen a float with a crane in the harbor. So those repairs are underway. We expect those repairs to be completed in the next week or so. The Stevens Field project is moving along very well. We do still plan to put this out to bid in May. I talked to Mr. Gould today. He's hopeful, I think, by the end of this month to come before the board and give a full presentation on everything that's transpired over the last 3 or 4 months as it relates to Stevens Field, and give everyone a snapshot of the construction timetable. So looking forward, I think, the last meeting here in April for Mr. Gould to come in. As you know, at town meeting in October, there was a vote taken to acquire land and right next door to the Manamet Fire Station. That land acquisition is complete. The bids I reported on last week were opened. We have 2 contractors that have come within the budget. We're now vetting those 2 contractors, and then we're making a bid award, I think, within about another week or so. The police department and fire department are doing very interesting training. It's called Active Shooter Hostile Event Response, ASHA training. So this is a combination type of training with the fire department, police department. They get together and they train on how to respond to active shooter events. Our fire department, unfortunately, is now equipped with body armor. So if they had to enter a facility where there was an active shooter, they are protected and they can render immediate care for those individuals who've been injured. So unfortunately, in this day and age, this is the type of training both our fire and police department have to go through, but we think we'll be better prepared if that day were ever to come. And the last thing, I just want to announce that next Monday, we'll be launching our new website. So look forward to that. Folks that are listening at home, go to the new website. I think everybody will be very impressed. Mr. Senesi and Mr. Joe Young took the lead on that and did a lot of hard work, I'd say, geez, for the last 4 or 5 months on this website. So I don't remember the last time the website was updated, but I think it's been at least 8 years. So we are looking forward to getting that thing up and going. We will do a presentation. Anthony, when is that? May 9th? We're going to come in and do our IT presentation of all the things that have happened in the last couple of months. Pending any questions, that's all I have for this evening.
I'd just like to say that I looked at that a little bit today with Anthony, and great job. I can't imagine how much time you spent on that, but that's a phenomenal website. It really is. People are going to be so impressed by that.
Do you mind if I say something? Thank you, Mr. Bletzer. We're hoping to have more outreach regarding, once the website goes live, we hope to have more outreach to members of the public, get more feedback regarding the site, how we can improve, and additionally maybe provide tutorials as to how to access certain information. I think it's pretty user-friendly, but you never know. So we're going to be taking feedback as it comes, so.
And I saw that 311, an incident was reported on the 10th, and on the 11th, it was fixed.
Right, so we have it's a
pothole situation.
Right.
And it went to the DPW, and the next day it was fixed, and the person emailed back. So that's impressive.
Correct. So we have a report a concern module where folks can, it's called See, Click, Fix. People can, we can talk more about this on May 9th, but folks can already start to utilize that service, report potholes, flooding, drainage issues. There's about 20 to 30 different categories of things that people can report to the town, and the response is 2 ways. The department that's assigned to it will receive the request, and the requestor will receive a response when that issue has been resolved, or if it's an ongoing concern that the town will address.
Yeah, now instead of calling Betty, you can just go on the website.
Well, that was my 311. It gets implemented before I leave office, so, which is great. And even the website, and not to sound foolish, but some candidates are promising a new website if they're elected into office. So you might want to send them an email specifically, let them know that it's going to be launched next week. Anyone else? Mr. Helm?
This might be more appropriate to the assistant town manager, but I know that the RFP for the Symes House went active last week. Do we have, or have we had any interest? I know people have to register in order to access the RFP and to respond. So we had anybody access?
We have. It's been light, but we have a few interested parties.
By light and a few, what would you, how
There's
would you
about
quantify
4
that?
people total who have requested bid specs.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have anything? No, this is the town manager. Okay. Now, next, John, is Select Board open discussion, old new business letters.
Derek, you had mentioned October town meeting. You talked about a parcel of land that had been closed on, and CPC met last Thursday night, and I'm concerned about articles that were passed at town meeting last October and their current status. So I just want to make sure that, I was hoping maybe at the next meeting you could have an update with respect to, especially 2 of them, Boy Scout Camp in West Plymouth, close to the Darby Pond Well, and you mentioned Stevens Field earlier. There was a little parcel, I think roughly half an acre, expanding that park by a little. But the current status, it's imperative that these things are not delayed. I'm concerned that there might be some sort of a communication breakdown, and especially when it comes to land purchases, we need to put those to bed as soon as possible. So that was it. I was hoping that we can get some sort of update through the chair at the next meeting.
Yeah, we're happy to provide an update and send the CPC committee as an update as well to those land acquisitions.
Do we know when the next CPC meeting is?
I don't.
Typically, they're in that every 2 to 3 week range, and we just met last Thursday. So
Okay. Mr. Helm?
I guess this be a question to the town manager. We all received the sample ballot for the May election, which included the candidates as well as the proposed language for the charter, the charter ballot question. And while I understand the process, and I understand that this is the Charter Commission, I just wanted to express my concern that unlike previous ballots initiatives, the wording is, in what we saw in the sample, less than objective. It's could be described as biased in one direction. I know that it begins by almost recommending that people vote yes. And I was wondering if you could update us on that, because I know we go to print. I know that I have no say in what that ballot language is, and I'm okay with that, but I would just like an update on where we stand.
Yeah, happy to provide an update. So as you pointed out, the town clerk had submitted a sample ballot to myself and others this morning. And after reviewing the summary of the proposed charter that was drafted by the Charter Commission, there was some, and I think in a couple of folks' opinion, some edits that had to be made. I had a conference call with the attorney that represented the Charter Commission during their deliberations. I explained the concerns, and that, as you pointed out, it may be less than neutral of a summary. Those edits were then communicated to the chair of the Charter Commission, and the attorney told me this evening that he plans to work with the chair and then ultimately through the Charter Commission to get them to approve any edits at their meeting tomorrow night. I believe we have until Thursday to go to print for the ballot, so that's the drop dead date to make any types of editorial changes to the summary statement.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to, I know that Mr. Helm and Mr. Bulletin are doing a live show tomorrow evening, and Steve, if you would like to come up and discuss some of the questions and concerns that I know Mr. Helm has had regarding that language, and I think we all have concerns.
Thank you very much. Steve Bulletin, Precinct 15. Like you, and probably even less so, I've only had a couple hours of physically holding the proposed language, and so I have not had the chance to do the type of due diligence that I normally do before standing before you. But what I did do was look at the law. So there is a very specific provision in the law that talks about this. We've heard about it many, many times in the whole charter process. It's General Laws, Chapter 43B, in this case, Section 11. It says, a copy of the ballot question and summary prepared in accordance with the following instructions shall be filed with the city or town clerk no later than 35 days before the election. Here are the instructions that the statute has. Where a new charter or single charter revision is being submitted at an election, set forth here a brief summary of its basic provisions, composition and mode of selection of the legislative and executive branches and school committee, or, if a change of none of these is involved, the most significant proposed change. That's it. That's all. That's all that's allowed per Massachusetts state law. Now, under state law, statutes are construed narrowly. That means if it's not in the statute, you don't get to add it. So again, I haven't had a chance to go in as much detail over this 500-plus word brief summary, but I have spotted a few things that clearly don't fall within that provision. Under the state law, essentially based on what I've read in the charter, the things that should be identified are the select board is changing, the town moderator position is eliminated from election, which I don't think I saw anywhere in their summary. I don't have a problem with, of course, the fact that they're referencing that certain other executive and legislative bodies are staying the same. It's not technically in there, but it's neither here nor there. That's fine. What shouldn't be in there is anything that would qualify as, the only thing the courts have ever talked about is it has to be fair and unbiased, essentially fair and neutral. Those are the words the courts have used. Fair meaning it can't mislead or misrepresent. The only thing that I saw in here that was clearly wrong was a reference to the assertion that these provisions require that any change to a town bylaw or regulation or approval by the town of any proposed project shall be reviewed by the planning board to ensure that such proposed change in a bylaw or regulation or proposed development permit align with the master plan. Well, as the vice chair of the planning board, you can imagine, I paid very, very careful attention to the provisions of the charter that relate to the planning board. That statement is inaccurate. The planning board, under the proposed charter revisions, does not review everything. It only reviews those things that are before the planning department. It does not include many areas. It does not include agricultural unless a special permit is necessary. It does not include anything having to do with economic changes, other than that falls under the economic development group. And it certainly does not have anything to do with any municipal improvements. We don't decide those. So it's not every permit. So that is simply an inaccurate statement that is proposed here. So that is something that I would strongly recommend be removed. I've noted that there are other non-neutral statements, aspirational statements. The word improved or improvements is used several times. Ensuring that things will happen is used. Statements which promise something are not appropriate. Whether or not something is a positive or a negative is for the voters to decide. It is not to be put forth. The point of the summary is it is to be factual, not aspirational, not promissory in nature. The summary is there not to lead or mislead, but to inform the voters. If we don't have a proper summary, if someone challenges our summary as being inappropriate, it is possible, I don't know all of the procedures, but it is possible that the entire election relating to the charter, the entire vote, could be withdrawn by the state. Court could turn around and say the summary was improper and therefore the vote must be held again with a proper summary. So I think that we should always err on the side of caution and provide what the statute calls for, no more and no less. And if there are any questions that I can answer, I'll certainly try.
I appreciate that, thank you. Mr. Blitzer.
Thank you, Steve, for that. For that. When I saw this ballot question in the summary, I looked at it, I read it, and, you know, I'm going to be a little harsher than Harry. I think this is the most biased piece of paper I've ever seen, and it was written by a biased chairman of a biased commission, okay? And I'm not speaking for the board. This is how I feel about this. You have words, this is all vote yes, and it goes on to all this. Then it says a no vote, says there's no change to the charter, one line. And then a yes vote, and it goes again down here. There's more information down here again. You get words in here, safeguards, government transparency, you know, words like that in here, under voting yes. It's biased, and I don't think this is right. So thank you. I just hope the public understands and reads this, and I hope the lawyers can make changes before they get this on Election Day, because I don't think this is it. This should be an unbiased question, and people should be able to vote and have the right information. Thank you.
I agree in the sense that it certainly should be neutral. That's the word the courts use. It should be neutral. It should be factual. And it should be accurate. It's as simple. I am not going to get into what anyone's intention was in drafting something, whether something was meant to mean something or not. That's neither here nor there. From a legal standpoint, and that's the only thing that I look at when it comes to this, is I want to make sure that we comply with the law so that the residents get the opportunity to vote based on their own perceptions, not on what someone else's perception is of the document. That's the whole point of the vote. That's why the statute requires us to send out a copy of the charter so the people make the decision, not that they then get to the ballot, to the polling place and look at their ballot and are told something and go, wait a minute, I'm not sure if that's what I read, but I'm going to trust this over my own reading. That's the point of the state law. It's to make sure that the will of the people is followed based upon their perceptions, not some perceived perception as to how the government may or may not want them to vote. And that's what we have to worry about. If the perception is that the people are being led in a certain fashion, that can be challenged. And it's certainly, I don't think, anyone's intention to mislead anyone. They want to have accurate information, and they want to follow the statute. That's all. I was just concerned when I looked at this that I saw things that did not seem to fall within what the statute seems to read. That's all. Thank you.
And I'd like to add one other thing. When it says a no vote, there's no information on why you should vote no. So I hope people, there'll be some information out there, and I'm sure you're going to talk about it in your forums. And I hope people listen to why people have recommended that you don't vote for this charter.
Well, for the same reason that I would not want any portion of a description to say that a yes vote gets you this, I would also not want anything on the ballot to say a no vote will do anything other than what the no vote is, which is the no vote will say, will keep the charter the same as it is now, meaning, and I would identify again the comparable changes. So if the yes, under the yes side, it says we go from 5 to 7, the no should say we remain at 5. If it says that the town moderator provision is eliminated as an elected position, the no should say town moderator will remain an elected position. It should be equal and balanced. Again, neutral, that's all. Nothing more. I'm not looking to advocate or demean any side. Merely want the voters to make the decision rather than have the perception that the town is favoring one side or the other. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And I can certainly talk long and hard about the charter, but I guess I'll stay quiet for a little bit. But it's unfortunate that, you know, there are facts that are actually published that have been prepared by our finance director that are legitimate numbers of the cost, almost $1.4 million of what this charter change would cost the taxpayers. And there are commissioners basically saying that it's a lie. And it's very offensive. And I can understand that their charter, commissioners want their charter to go through, but it really should have been what's best for the people in this town and not what was best for the commissioners themselves. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Nope. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you.